Welcome to the 2023 June Summit. We are thrilled that each of you has joined us today, and we're excited to share the work that we have underway to better listen to, include, and respect people with disabilities, and further our focus on creating an even more inclusive Keystone, community, and world. My name is Leah Klisch, and I'm the Director of Operations Education for Keystone Human Services. I am fortunate to have the opportunity to work with many of you on our organizational initiatives around inclusion, diversity, and equity, and it is my pleasure to be your host for this evening. Over the past year, Keystone Human Services has partnered with Inclusion International, exploring how the Listen, Include, Respect global guidelines for inclusive participation and meaningful participation for people with intellectual disability can impact an organization that provides direct support. From the start of our partnership, both Keystone Human Services and Inclusion International were committed to an organic process, creating a framework that enhances the incredible work that we do every day. Instead of constructing a project that was in addition to our daily operations, we needed to find ways to incorporate the guidelines into our existing workflows and practices. With the collaboration and support of Inclusion International, Keystone leadership, and teams across the organization, many of whom that are here tonight, our interdisciplinary Listen, Include, Respect Steering Committee has created spaces where we are learning side by side with people with disability, from people with disability, strengthening our understanding of inclusive participation and what it means to provide good support. Before we begin this evening's program, I'd like to make some brief announcements, as well as take a moment to recognize and thank those who made this evening's events possible. First, you'll notice that today's event is being video recorded, and a photographer, Sherry Kling, that's you, is taking pictures. If you would prefer not to have your picture taken or used, please speak with one of the folks at the registration desk. Second, Sue Swenson is unfortunately unable to join us this evening due to illness, and we are thrilled that Connie Lauren Bowie, Executive Director of Inclusion International, has joined us this evening as our keynote speaker. Thank you, Connie. And third, we hope to have an opportunity to have even more discussion after this evening's presentations. So just a reminder as we do, to please be thoughtful to use accessible language. Avoid jargons and acronyms. We want to make sure that everyone that we're communicating with has an understanding of what we're trying to share. Now, our thank yous. I would like to start by thanking Kiana Porter-Bennett and Shannon Bolton for all of their work in pulling together this evening's event. There is so much moving and shaking behind the scenes, and both Kiana and Shannon make it all seamless. We want to recognize and thank our hosts, the Manor of Mountain View, for their donation of this beautiful space again this year, and their contributions towards this evening's catering. To tonight's sponsors, the Pennsylvania Development Disabilities Council, and Working for Inclusive and Transformative Healthcare, the WITH Foundation. Thank you for your generous contributions towards this evening event and our shared learning workshops. And thank you to FX Media and JP Lilly for coordinating our videography and AV needs. We also need to extend our appreciation and gratitude to the communications and development teams for all of their assistance and support in both coordinating and promoting last week's events at the UN, as well as this week's June Summit events. And lastly, but certainly not least, we need to thank our Listen, Include, Respect Steering Committee and teams who have partnered in this journey. We know how difficult this work can be, and the steering committee has worked tirelessly over the course of the past year. In the midst of competing priorities and tasks, the steering committee has remained steadfastly committed to this process. And the teams, the people across the organization who have not only joined in these conversations, but have begun leading them. Thank you. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's first speaker, Keystone Human Services Vice President of Intellectual Disability Services, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, Greg Willems. Greg has been a partner in this work from the beginning, and his guidance has been invaluable. Greg welcomes collaboration, encourages teams to think bigger and value innovation, and as many of us are aware, always serves as a reminder that it is a beautiful day. Please join me in welcoming Greg Willems.
Well, it is a beautiful day, don't you think? It's a beautiful day here in Pennsylvania, and thank you. What a beautiful venue to be here, and I very much appreciate this group. And I want to echo Leah's comments on thanking our sponsors and the Pennsylvania Developmental Disability Council and the WITH Foundation. The events like this are not possible without active supporters, so thank you, and thank you for your support during this. And on behalf of Keystone, I would like to welcome all of you, and thank you for coming tonight and participating in this event. As this evening approached, I was thinking about our journey to here and what it's taken and the road and the path that we have taken to tonight. And it started for me in the June Summit of 2019. How many of you were at that event? It was interesting for us. It was coming on the back end of the Convention of the Rights for Persons with Disabilities in New York, and Genevieve and her group were getting together, and it was really, we had a number of self-advocates from around the world that were talking about their lived experiences. And it really formed a foundation for our work moving forward, and the thoughts of what we could do differently from services, not only to develop, to support people in being better self-advocates, but how do you create a service system that's really not geared towards that? We work in a Medicaid system that's really not conducive to innovation. So it's a challenge for us, and it's a challenge for Keystone, and it's not, but Keystone is known for accepting these challenges. So I was thinking about that journey, and what happened in the next year was we had COVID, but more importantly, or as important, there was the great social unrest that occurred throughout this country. And as part of addressing that under the direction of Charlie Hooker, Keystone took some very active measures to become a more inclusive, equitable, and diverse organization. There were listening groups that occurred and listening that we took on as an organization involving all the staff and leaderships and work groups. And we learned to really listen to each other a little bit more and to really challenge ourselves to think about how do we become a more inclusive organization. But there was something missing in that conversation. And what was missing was the people that accept services through Keystone. But that foundation was there. So as we embraced on this, it was interesting to me that last year, when our partners, Inclusion International, came out with their Listen, Include, and Respect guidelines, this presented us with a great opportunity to help take those next steps and involve people who accept supports through Keystone really into the conversations and include them and take that next step to be an inclusive organization. So today I had a great day today. And not only was it a beautiful day, I had a great day. I got to go to the work group. All you guys, raise your hand if you were in that work group today. Oh, it was wonderful, because at the work group, you not only had people with lived experiences, you had DSPs, and you had management and leadership in the room that were engaged in an active conversation about what does it mean to be an inclusive organization? And how do we challenge ourselves? This is not just putting in a system, putting something in. This is organic. This has to come from the direct support professionals and the people that are accepting services. One of the great lines today was, you cannot be an inclusive organization unless you have leadership from people who are accepting those services. And what I saw today from Mike and Matt and Jordan, and I could go on, was that those individuals stepping up and sharing with us what they would like to see Keystone be, what they would like their services to be, how do we listen, how do we hear you, and it was wonderful. It was a wonderful day for me, and I really appreciated that. So we've begun this process, and from what I understand from talking with our partners at Inclusion International, we're the first organization as a service provider to really accept this challenge in a really organic way. And it's not an easy path. As I said, the Medicaid environment and what we work in is it's a rules-based system, and this is breaking those rules. This is encouraging people to have a voice, to take a lead in their services, and take a lead in their supports. And it's really a phenomenal step that I saw today, and I want to thank all of you, and you have my sincere appreciation. So the mission of Keystone is to support individuals to be valued and contributing members of their community. So as we look today, the work I saw today really aligns with that vision. To be valued and contributing meaning you have an active voice in that process and you're engaged in those leadership roles. So again, I applaud the work that was done today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share the journey that we've been on over these last couple of years. Thank you very much.
Listen, Include, Respect is a set of international guidelines that was developed by Inclusion International and Down Syndrome International to help support groups, organizations, agencies, self-advocacy leaders all over the world in how we can continue a focus on being more inclusive in our shared work together. The Listen, Include, Respect guidelines, I view them as a roadmap to help organizations like Keystone Human Services always stay focused on making sure that all voices are heard and that people impacted by disability are part of our projects and participating in a meaningful way.
Listen, include, respect means you should listen to me. Listen what I have to say. Include me into wherever it is. Include me in my neighborhood. Include me in the community. Respect me. Respect me as a person, not a person with a disability or possibilities.
So I've got involved with this project a little over a year ago. I was asked to be on a panel for the June Summit in 2022 to talk about the work that we're doing and the work that we plan to do, as well as the partnership with Inclusion International to do this at Keystone. And it was exciting to be the first provider agency to embark on this mission. And it's challenging, but it's a good challenge because doing what we've always done is easy, but doing something different and innovative, especially when it challenges the way things have always been done, is what makes this work so rewarding, but also all the challenges that we've been working through.
In my job as a DSP, I have found it frustrating that I spend most of my time just doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and sometimes lose the focus on the people who choose our services and their wishes, their needs, their dreams, because we're just busy doing the next thing. So this is a chance to intentionally start thinking about the things that are important, because that's why we're there.
A direct support professional is a coach, a teacher, a role model, an advocate for inclusion, a community bridge builder.
Because one of the things that I've learned with Keystone, the mission and vision of Keystone, is for the individual to live a full, meaningful lives in the community where we have to show them the respect, we give them the choice, and we allow them to build relationship. And I feel this actually, this campaign, this right campaign will actually enhance that greatly and help the individual, the people that we support to actually have that belief in themselves and then the respect that they feel that they desire, and then we can accord that to them.
That we can learn more about ourselves and how to educate other people to let them know that we're a group of, we have a powerful voice and we're going to use it to make ourselves known that our disabilities do not hold us back.
We just don't want this to be a project. We want this to continue throughout Keystone and go on and on. And I want other states to look at Keystone as a beacon.
Also, thank you for joining us earlier today. I'm glad that that time had an impact on you. It certainly had an impact on us as well. And we share your excitement about bringing the voices of the people who accept our services to our conversations across the organization about how we can create a more inclusive Keystone. Thank you. And thank you to Bill and Nathan and April and Fascinae and Jordan for participating in the video. I'd now like to welcome our panelists to come and join us on stage. This evening's panelists will be sharing perspectives on this work and its impact both across the organization and in our communities as well. So I'd like to welcome Chris Pegaron, our President and Chief Executive Officer of Partnerships for People. Come on up, Chris. I won't bite. And Chris is being joined by two of our partners from Inclusion International, Tia Nellis, Self-Advocate Consultant on Listen, Include, Respect, and Ailish Hardy, Program Manager. Thank you.
I sat there and I was listening to everything Leah, Greg, and after seeing that video, I almost forgot that I'm part of the program because I was so inspired by some of the things I was hearing. But even more importantly, we have two folks from Inclusion International who are here to assist us today, and hopefully we can have a conversation about next steps for Keystone and next steps for Inclusion International. So I'll start and throw a question to you both, Ailish and Tia. Can you talk a little bit about the main guidelines of Listen, Include, Respect?
So Listen, Include, Respect, as has been mentioned, and I won't go into too much detail about it because I know a lot of you were here last year where we kind of got into more depth. But Listen, Include, Respect is our work with Down Syndrome International, and our members and Down Syndrome International's members came together to create some guidelines about how to make sure that people with intellectual disabilities are included and can take part in the work of organisations. So they're very practical guidelines, but they're based on some key themes, some key ideas. And we thought Tia and I could just kind of briefly talk about some of those. And this will be the second time a lot of the people that were here at the workshop earlier will be hearing about those, but I hope you'll forgive us for that. So the key guideline, the number one principle of Listen, Include, Respect is about believing in inclusion and really knowing that it's possible and understanding that there's easy things that we can all do to make sure that inclusion is real for people with intellectual disabilities. Tia, is there anything you'd add to that?
So, in order for the guidelines to work, that's why this is the number one principle, is believing in inclusion. Because I feel if you don't believe that people with disabilities can be included, and you don't feel like they should be included in certain places, then how is that going to work? If you say you want to become a more inclusive organization. So I think that the first thing you need to do is make sure that your organization believes in inclusion in order for things to start happening and changing. And we all have a responsibility in that, not only direct support workers or the executive boards or the board committees or anybody like that. It goes from everybody doing their part. Like we told everybody in the room today, it takes all of us to work together and in believing in the same thing, because everybody has a part.
The thing that I love most about the Listen, Include, Respect is it's so easy to understand just hearing the name of it. But it's good to hear both of you expand on it. I know you're also doing some work, not just here in Pennsylvania, but also over at the United Nations. I know you were there last week. You have any comments, or how was your experience over at the United Nations?
Yeah, I mean, so we were there for a conference called the Conference of State Parties, which is when state parties, which are governments, countries, states, come together and talk about the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, which is a big agreement that lots of countries have signed to say that they will work on the rights of people with disabilities. So Tia and I were there, and our other Inclusion International colleagues, and lots of other people from civil society, which is the organizations which are not businesses or governments. And civil society have a really important part to play in at cost and on working on the convention. And we took part in a lot of sessions. Tia spoke in the big main, you know, if you ever think of the UN and that big room, yep, that the main guy sits in, Tia was speaking in that room. Do you want to explain a bit more about what you're talking about, Tia?
I thought, well, first I want to share a little bit my opinion on what was going on. It was so important that the UN was starting to hear from people about why it's important to listen to people and to include them in the right way and to make things accessible for people so that they can participate and understand and all the important work that the UN does, the United Nations does, and especially on the rights of people with disabilities. As our friends like to say, nothing about us without us. And so I talked about why it's so important that you make things accessible, because if you want us at the table and you want us to participate in the way that we can help understand things and give you our advice and how to make things accessible, then we need to know about what it's all about. And we need to know that we need an agenda ahead of time, but not just like the day before. And we need to do that so that we can know what things are happening and participate in the right way. Because they send us an agenda the day before, and how many people could really think about what they were going to do the day before? And I think we talked about listen, include, respect a lot at the UN, and a lot of people heard people with disabilities talking about why this is important, how to include us. Everybody talked about, in their own way, about here's how you can make this possible to make things more accessible. And they are trying to do some things, but they're just not quite there yet. So we got to keep on reminding them, okay, we're going to give you points for trying, but you still have work to do, and we're going to keep watching, and we're going to keep coming back and reminding you that this is important, because it's not only their United Nations, it's our United Nations too. And we deserve to be a part of that, and we deserve to be at the table.
I think that's a really good point, especially around that it's, you know, points for trying. It was the 16th Conference of State Parties, so, you know, that has been happening for a long time. And Tia, in her intervention, said, you know, come on now, like, we've been talking about this for a long time. When are you going to start actually listening and including us. And like Tia said, she's been very generous by saying points for trying, but they, you know, they are starting to.
It's always important to thank people for what they do, so that they continue to listen to what you want them to listen to. So, yeah, they did a couple of things, and but we also put down. I mean, I also told them, yeah, but don't think that you're going to get away with what you've done already, and think that it's okay and we're going to go away. And it's important for as self-advocate leaders to speak up and to teach people and to educate people about how they can do this work, and also to let them know that here's the things that aren't so helpful. And here's the things that you could do to make this better, and people can participate better and let you know what we need. Because if you're inviting us to something, we just don't want to be a token. We want to play a meaningful part. We want to be included, and we want you to listen to us and hear our voice. And so at the end, I give them the action step to please listen to us, respect us, and include us.
So I'm gonna. So I'm going to ask Chris and Tia a couple of questions now. So, Chris, maybe I'll start with you, if that's okay. Why do you think it's important for support professionals and people with who use services to learn together in this kind of way that we've been doing today?
Well, I think Tia spoke about a lot of why it's important, but I'll just add a couple things. I think number one, it's important for our support professionals, number one, to understand what they're getting, what their job is. Their job is not to just be a caretaker, but for them to be a innovative person to work with another person. That person may have a disability, but there's ways you can support them in a way that is beneficial for them in their life. So I think it's really important for them to really understand that their role is not just to do the day-to-day things, it's to go above and beyond. And I think listen, include, respect is to figure out what that going above and beyond is. Tia talked about getting points for participation, and I think Keystone as an organization is looking to take it to the next level and not just get points for participation. We're really looking to partner with people that we support and hear them, listen. I think sometimes that's what we don't do. We don't listen enough as leaders. So the more we listen, the more we can help the people that we support. And I think for the direct support professionals who are the ones that are out there impacting the lives physically, daily, on a daily basis, it's important for them to have good leadership, but also to have a connection with the people they support to make sure that they are supporting them in the right way.
Thanks, Chris. Would you add anything to that, Tia?
Yeah, I want to add that this is a journey, and it's going to take time, and to know that we're all on this journey together, but we're not going to let you get away with not moving the journey ahead. So I'm not so much on giving you thanks and praise as long as you keep the journey moving and keeping up with making sure that people are having a voice, people are listened to. Because in our organization, we have a phrase called TEAM, and it stands for Together Everybody Achieves More. So if we all work together as a team, we can make this world a better place for people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and get the things that are important to people's lives out there, and to make sure that you guys, not only you guys as direct support workers or as, as management and everything like that, play a part, but we also play a part as people with disabilities, use our voices to speak up and express what's important to us and tell people what we need and tell people if we don't understand something and raise our hand and say we don't understand this, or can you explain it in a different way so that we understand? Because we all have a job. And we talked to the self-advocates today, and we talked to them that we have what, guys? Power. We have power, but the only way to have power is if you use your voice.
Thank you. You've kind of answered the second question, but I'll ask it anyway, which is why will having people with intellectual disabilities, why will that help Keystone? So maybe, Chris, you can comment on that a little bit.
Tia said something that resonated a little bit with me that I don't think I thought about until Tia was included in this discussion. She mentioned doing things that we don't want done. We do a lot of planning and a lot of brainstorming like this. Our organizations do a lot of this brainstorming, and they're well-intentioned to help someone progress in their lives. What goals? Our regulators create rules and regulations to how we are funded without including the people that are receiving services. So I think that's the most important thing. So as we go down this journey, as Tia mentioned, we have to continue to include the people we support. Getting people from different backgrounds can provide perspectives that you never imagined. And I honestly think we don't do this enough. We don't do this brainstorming enough. Organizations look for best practices. What's the best thing out there? We don't want to make mistakes. We have hundreds and thousands of staff. We want things to be perfect. Going down this journey of listen, include, and respect is risks that we take as an organization that can have meaningful consequences that I don't think you can prepare for. And I think that's Keystone's vision in advancing the human spirit. How do you advance the human spirit without including the human spirit in the discussion to advance it? So, as I said, I just think it's important to continue down this journey and to make sure we include those and give a voice to those that, frankly, just haven't had a voice in the past.
So can I add something? When you include people with disabilities and you talk about the things that are important to them, and you talk about how much you support each other, because sometimes people don't tell people with disabilities how much they support you as much as you support them. And that's really important to tell somebody how much you work together as a team and you help each other and you support each other. And that's a really important thing for both groups of people to know how much they help each other. And people with disabilities can say some things that you might not be able to when you are wanting them to advocate for something that's important to you. By including them and talking with them and making sure that they understand these are the things that are important to us that we might not be able to say as a service provider or a manager or something like that, but people with disabilities can help you then and advocate for the things that you need, like getting your direct support worker more money so they don't go away, right? Making sure they know that these are the direct support workers that are there for me. They help me. They help me be included in the community. They help me be on boards and committees. They help me learn about self-advocacy. Those are things that are important where you can work together and helping each other. And basically, I love my role in this because I'm a self-advocate. And the most important thing about being a self-advocate is learning all the things that you learn, but then giving your tools to somebody else who's learning how to speak up for the first time, and knowing when they do that, that you had something to do with it. And knowing how great that feels, that you had the opportunity for somebody to talk to people about what's important to them, to say their name. You might not think that's that is a big deal, but when somebody says their name and they get that courage to do that for the first time, it is a big deal, because then that gives them the voice to keep continuing and to talk about what's important to them. So that is a big deal. And by including people at the beginning, you're helping each other and you're supporting each other. And like everybody said, we're in this together.
And I think that's, just to add on to that, I think that's something that is exciting about this work, is that we're kind of, we're at the start of this, we're kind of really piloting, we're trying something new, and that's exciting. But also as kind of, as Inclusion International, like, we don't get to work with service providers like this very often. And I come from a service provider background. I was a DSP, well, the equivalent in the UK. And being able to kind of, see people work with service users and work together and really kind of carry out the things that they want to do together to achieve is great. So I think we're almost at the time, but Tia, you've got 2 more questions, I think, for Chris and I.
Yep. Okay. So this question is, Chris, what is exciting for you about this work?
I have to pick one thing? I pick my daughter up from school every day, and the first thing I ask her is, what did you learn? And for some reason, she doesn't like that question because it makes her think. And you ask, how was your day? She'll say it was good. What did you do? She say, I ran. But if I ask her, what did she learn? She has to think intrinsically. And so she got good at answering that question. A couple of days ago, I asked her the question. She asked me, well, what did you learn at work? She switched it on me. So what makes me excited at work is when I'm able to learn. And Tia, you said it, I wish I had a notebook. I can write this down. Hopefully we're recording this. Our direct support professionals and our leadership have to recognize they're also learning from the people we support as much as we are teaching. So that's what makes me most excited. When I was invited to speak at the summit, I thought back to listening to Dennis Felty talk about, Keystone Human Services 50 years ago, and the people that were at the table 50 years ago to make people with disability be more a part of the community. So now we're here 50 years later, and it's exciting to me to be part of the next 50 years of Keystone, and the next 50 years of support for people with disability. As we mentioned multiple times, Keystone is the first provider to partner with Inclusion International, and that's something that I personally take pride in, and I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, take pride in. So I'm glad that when I go home today, I have a good answer from my daughter. When she asks me what did I learn, I can tell her a lot of things Tia taught me today.
So, Ailish, why is getting the process right important?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. So, it takes time, and you said it earlier that it's a journey. It takes time to get things right. It takes time to really listen and understand and change cultures, like perhaps unlearn some things that we've done for a long time that we need to maybe look at again and think about how we can do that differently. And that takes time, and that takes a process. And I think we've been kind of learning together over the last year and working in inclusive teams, and that's been, I'm not going to say challenging, but it's taken time for us to kind of really make sure that we're doing it right. And I think the meeting today, I don't know if you agree, Tia, but the workshop for me really felt like that, okay, where we have done it right. We've taken the time, we've thought about what we need to do, and that's resulted in making sure that everyone was there able to say what they think and feel, rather than, rushing something and it not being truly inclusive and truly participatory. So that's why I think getting the process right is important.
And the last thing we said is, remember to celebrate, because if you don't celebrate, you can burn out real easy. You could be saying, oh, I got to do this next, and I got to do that next, and I got to do this next, and you're going to be, right? And if you don't remember to celebrate, everybody's going to be burnt out, and they're not going to want to do the next step. So we have to celebrate our accomplishments, but remember that just because we celebrated what we've done, we still have more work to do. And that remember that it is a journey and we're all in this together. So that means everybody has a part, everybody needs to play their part in order for this to work. And we are so happy. And I just want to say to everybody today who participated, great job. You guys did a great job. You talked about what was important. You had some great ideas, and you listened to people, you respected the people, and you were there for people. So great job, guys. Give yourselves a hand. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That's
Thank you.
Group has done some great things. They are doing a pilot with 2 programs that we operate, one in Delaware, one in Pennsylvania. And it's really exciting to know that we are pulling in not only the people that we support, the people who choose our services, but also the DSPs that support them, because that's really where this project is going to gain steam. We can say we want to do this from afar, but unless we are actually doing the work on the ground and having not only the people who choose our services involved, but the people who are providing that service and who are that direct support, that's where this is really going to get success.
In the past, direct support professionals were viewed primarily as a caregiver, and Keystone Human Services has been at the forefront of reshaping that image.
When I found my voice, I was able to let them know that I can do this, this, and this if it's explained well and broke down into easy accomplishments. Now that I'm retired, I am still working on those goals to become more independent.
Or we go out in the community, we do things together, we listen to each other, we show them the things they can do, not what they can't do. We look at their possibility, not their disability. They're going to the churches in the community, be active in the community, volunteer in the community, so people will say, oh, there goes that guy, or goes that woman, you know, they have a name.
Respect means to me treat others the way you want to be treated, basically the golden rule. Because if you don't respect people, people won't respect you back. And they'll treat you the same way that you treat them.
Inclusion isn't a project or a task or even a training. Embracing inclusive practices and celebrating diversity isn't something we do, it's who we are. And one of the things that I appreciate most about Keystone Human Services, and one of the things I'm most proud of in being a part of this organization, is our commitment to that journey. Our willingness to continue to challenge ourselves, to ask questions around how we can build more awareness and understanding.
I'm so excited working on this project with Keystone Human Services. When I started this work, I didn't know what it was all about. But when I got into it, I was glad that I was part of the team. What I think about the work that how this work will benefit Keystone is first, I want to appreciate Keystone because they have taken the first step in recognizing the importance of partnership with self-advocates to strengthen the knowledge and understanding of having an inclusive environment. Not forgetting the direct support professionals who are recognized as advocates and enablers of inclusion. While everyone at Keystone is listened, included, and respected, that for me was a big win. Like, I like to work in a company where is inclusive of everybody, and everybody is feels like they are included, listened to, and respected, because that goes with let me say one of my values, core values.
Thank you, Destiny and Ruth, for your contributions to the video, and thank you, Chris, Ailish, and Tia. Your support and your partnership over the course of the past year and well before that has been so meaningful and impactful, and Tia's not kidding. She will hold us accountable. She does play that role, but she is also the first one to acknowledge and support us in celebrating our successes. So thank you for this journey. I would now like to introduce this evening's keynote speaker, Connie Lauren Bowie, Executive Director at Inclusion International. Recognized by the UN as a global organization of people with intellectual disabilities and their families, Inclusion International has over 200 national member organizations in 115 countries. Keystone is proud to be one of those members. Connie is a longtime advocate for the rights of people with intellectual disabilities and their families. She led Inclusion International's representations at the UN Ad Hoc Committee negotiations that led to the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. She directed Inclusion International's global campaigns on poverty, inclusive education, the right to live in the community, the right to decide, and subsequently authored reports on those articles of the convention. With her leadership, Inclusion International is building programs to support its global network in inclusive education, self-advocacy, and in other priority areas. Responsible for a global staff team, projects in every region of the world, and engagement with governments and international institutions, Connie offers over 25 years of experience in human rights, public policy, and advocacy work. Please join me in welcoming Connie Lauren Bowie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to start, as I usually do, by apologizing that you have me instead of Sue Swenson, my boss, the president of Inclusion International. Sue spoke to you by video last year, for those of you who were here, and you will know from that she's a powerful storyteller and a powerful speaker. And I have to say, coming on the heels of that panel, I'm feeling a little intimidated about making this as interesting and engaging as possible. I'd like to just do three things for you tonight. One, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Inclusion International and those 200 member organizations around the world that we work with, because I think that gives you some perspective and solidarity about other groups that are fighting for inclusion in the world. The second thing is I'm going to tell you the story of the creation of the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. I know that sounds dry. I'll do my best to find the key things. And I think the most important part of that is, why should it matter? Why should it matter to you in your work? Why does it matter to us in our partnership with Keystone? So I'll go through a couple of those things just for a little bit more context. Inclusion International is, as Leah introduced, the organization of people with intellectual disabilities and their families. It's almost 70 years old. It's an organization of organizations, member organizations. And when the organization was founded, you can imagine 70 years ago, many of the organizations that came together were from wealthier countries. They were usually run by parents. and they were organizations that were trying to share what they were doing across jurisdictions, learn from each other, kind of like what we're still doing 70 years later. The big difference, though, is that probably 30, 35 years ago, the organization recognized that the leadership should be actually self-advocates in families, and that people with intellectual disabilities needed to be part of the leadership of the entire network and in those organizations. And today, Inclusion International has a council, our board, which has 5 regions of the world represented, and each region has 2 representatives. One of those representatives is a person with an intellectual disability. So our board is composed of 10 regional representatives, 5 who are self-advocates. And you can imagine operating at a global level in different time zones, in different languages, with different kinds of accommodation needs. That is a massive ongoing challenge. And we take the challenge very seriously. We work at it every day. We fail a little bit every day, and we get up and we do a little better the next day. And that's part of being a learning movement. And my team, who supports that representative board, are committed to being okay with making some mistakes. We do it. We try, we do better. And during COVID, we learned an enormous amount about how we could be uniting people, and what keeps them coming back together as organizations is this sense of solidarity in trying to build inclusion globally. So that's just a little bit about who we are. I'll come back to that in the context of our partnership with Keystone in a minute. But I want to talk a little bit about human rights and the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and particularly why that's important to this partnership, but also to the work that you do every day. The convention, as some of you will know, was negotiated. This was the 16th Conference of States Parties, and there were 3 years of negotiations before that, so I'm going to say 20 years. We, Inclusion International, were in the negotiations of that convention with all the other cross-disability organizations globally. We brought self-advocates from different parts of the world to the UN to be part of those conversations. We worked alongside of our colleagues in other disability movements to try to make sure the voices of self-advocates and their families were heard in the convention. And the issues that our members told us they wanted to prioritize, because many of the other disability groups were focused on physical accessibility or sign language interpretation, or the issues that were particularly priorities for them. Our members told us that the most important things for them were inclusive education, the right to live and be included in the community, which includes the closure of large residential institutions, legal capacity, which I'm going to come back to, which sounds like the most dry thing, but that's the thing I'm going to talk about, and the role of families. And so there are very strong articles in the convention that articulate inclusive education, the right to live in the community, and legal capacity. And there's a chapeau, a preamble in the convention that refers to the role of families that says, everything you read here in terms of the rights of people with disabilities means that you have to support the role of families in order to achieve them. So it's a cross-cutting aspect of the convention. The reason I want to talk about legal capacity isn't because lawyers are important and laws are the critical thing that we all live by. It's because the convention's major contribution to human rights, all human rights, was this idea behind Article 12, which is legal capacity. Many of you in many states will have experience with people who live under guardianship and have guardianship in their lives. And there's a lot of legal advocacy around changing those systems. And that is important, but that's not the core day-to-day important thing. The principle behind the negotiations of the legal capacity was around the idea that whatever disability a person has, whatever difficulty a person has articulating, every human being has will and preference. Every single human being on the planet has will and preference. Our job is to be able to understand that will and preference and to respect it and to implement it, to do something with it. And so this concept of moving from substitute decision-making, where someone makes a decision for you, to supported decision-making was pretty fundamental. And for our members globally, the entire convention is irrelevant. All the other rights, the right to health, the right to education, the right to live in the community, are irrelevant if there isn't this principle that it's directed by the person's will and intention. What you want in your life, you should be able to, articulate and have self-direction. And I'm going to tell you just a quick story about Sue Swenson and her son Charlie. I know that Sue told you a couple of stories about Charlie last year, for those of you who were here. We were involved in the negotiations around the convention, and this very difficult conversation around Article 12, the legal capacity, was being negotiated, and the disability organizations were in quite a lot of disagreement amongst themselves about what it should look like and what it means. And Sue was there as a part of our delegation, as a mom, and Charlie, who some of you will have heard about, Charlie didn't speak, Charlie didn't walk, Charlie had a multitude of disabilities and wasn't able to communicate in traditional ways. However, when we were in the conference negotiations, there was a heavy emphasis by the disability community on people obviously speaking for themselves and being in the room. And so the disability organizations turned to Sue when she was trying to talk about what legal capacity meant for Charlie. And they said, you can't be here. You don't have a disability. You're a parent. You're not a person with a disability. If you want to have Charlie's voice heard, bring Charlie. And so over the course of the negotiations, which took about 3 years, we were meeting every 6 months in New York for weeks at a time. And we Sue, managed to get Charlie, his supporter, his brother, and Sue to New York for the next round of negotiations. So we walked into the room of the disability advocates, still continuing to talk about this article and how it would be negotiated. And Sue turned to the other disability advocates. Many of them are lawyers. Many of them are, academics. They're all talking about the detailed text of this new law. And she said, you told me to bring Charlie so he could speak. I want you to ask Charlie what he thinks of this convention. And she stepped back. And Charlie doesn't have words, but he has mannerisms and was sort of making noise, but not articulating. And there was a hugely uncomfortable pause in which Sue made a really clear point that if we are truly going to respect that every single person has the right to make choices in their lives, you're going to need the community of people around him to be able to help you understand what that will and preference is. And that includes his brother, his mother, his support worker, all of the people who we have in our lives who help us live in this world. And after the sort of very uncomfortable moment, Sue came back and said, now I would invite you to ask any of you who would like to take Charlie to lunch and ask Charlie what he would like to have for lunch. Good luck. Like if you are not going to be working with us who know Charlie, then you're failing at your mission to make this convention inclusive. I honestly think Charlie had an impact on the convention in that moment that shifted the perspective of the broad disability community to understand they weren't there just for themselves. They were there for every single human being, including those who don't articulate and aren't able to speak in ways that we all understand. So as much as the article is an international law, which I take very seriously, and we hope governments take very seriously, the truth is the implementation of that happens in everyday decisions. It happens in the work you do at Keystone, day after day after day, always trying and striving to understand not what you want for the person or what you think is safe, what does the person want, and what's our role in helping the person achieve what they want in their lives, where they live, how they get support, what they do on a day-to-day basis if they volunteer, what their likes are, what they don't like, as Tia said, the things you shouldn't do. So I think the convention is really a kind of a core turning point for us in our work at Inclusion International. A couple of years ago, we changed our membership structure to allow for organizations that were not disability organizations or family-led organizations to include organizations that shared our vision. And Keystone, I walked today by the meeting room and I read your mission on the wall, and I thought that could be written as a part of our statement of unity. It really is about creating better lives and helping people live their best lives. And as an organization, I think that's really what Keystone does and why we were drawn together in terms of partnerships. I'll just talk a little bit more about that partnership. I want to make sure I'm not repeating myself. I think that the importance of the work that we're doing under Listen, Include, Respect is that it's actually the operationalization of legal capacity. It's not the lawyer's version, it's the day-to-day version. And I think we work a lot with organizations in the Global South. And honestly, if they were here today, they would tell you how lucky you are to have all of these services and supports and the context that you have in the United States. The flip side of that, though, is that we can get lost in those services, that sometimes services can become alienating. We know in Europe and in other countries where there's progressive and deep systems of service, people are often isolated because the service comes between them and their community. And I think what Keystone has shown us is that an organization like Keystone and the work that you do can actually be help build community, not just for the individual, but also for entire communities. And so we're very excited about the partnership with Keystone because many of our members, some of the ones who were founding organizations in the early, 70 years ago, were organizations that were doing that first job of figuring out what services should look like. They're still doing it that way. They haven't changed very much. They may have moved from some large-scale institutions into some group homes, but they haven't changed the philosophy of how they think about the support that they provide to people. And so for us, this project is a safe space. It's something we're hoping that we'll be able to continue along doing together. It's okay if we make mistakes. That's part of the journey. And then we're hoping that we can learn from this and bring others along and have conversations with our member organizations in places like Europe, the UK, where Ailish actually worked for our member organization that does direct services in the UK. And we're really trying to find ways to bring organizations like Keystone together to have, hard conversations about how do you operate in a policy environment where governments are expecting you to only be delivering services based on a pay scale and based on getting and making it a business. How do you change that to become an organization that's actually creating community and building human rights? So those are my kind of general thoughts. I wanted to just underline a couple of small things about Listen, Include, Respect. I can't do justice beyond what the panel did, but I just wanted to go back one step and underline something about Listen, Include, Respect. When my colleague from Down Syndrome International and I were at a cross-disability meeting several years ago, there was a lot of conversation about accessibility. Most of those organizations have recognized standards for what accessibility should look like. They're ISO standards. They're like the built environment. What should this look like? How big, how wide should the lectern be? They're very scripted, and advocates can demand it. You can use the ADA here and say, I have the right to this desk. I have the right to, a transportation system that I can get onto, or whatever that might be. There were no standards for what inclusive participation for people with intellectual disabilities look like. There might be state-level standards for your services, but there's no standards for what does inclusive participation mean globally. And so we undertook to ask our members globally what they were doing and what good practice was. And what you're doing with our partnership is experimenting with what those good practices are. And we really applaud you. We will protect this conversation and space, and then we will ask you to help provide global leadership throughout our network so that we can move inclusion forward, and we really look to your leadership in that way. And I thank the Keystone team for having me here. I'm very sorry that Sue wasn't able to be with you. Maybe next year we'll keep trying for Sue. So thank you very much. Really pleased to be here and happy to chat with anyone if you want to continue the conversation afterwards.
Thank you, Connie. And thank you for the powerful reminder that the impact of this work really breathes in our everyday decisions. That's been such a critical hinge for us over the course of the past year. So as we conclude this evening's presentations, I'd just like to share one final thought. Amongst members of the steering committee, there has been discussion around our progress in this work, and perhaps even some concern expressed that we are not further along or have achieved more. Part of the challenge of this work is that it does not fit into a traditional project management framework that can be directed by a single group. So to my fellow steering committee members, I'd like to offer that the fact that we haven't reached a finish line is inconsequential. A finish line does not exist. An end to this work is illusory. What matters is that we've begun. In our world of deadlines, competing priorities, requirements to demonstrate progress, and identify outcomes, it is easy to forget that inclusion is not something we do. Inclusion is who we are. There have been shifts advancing how we work together that have occurred over the course of the past year. To build the momentum so critical to continue to move us forward, the steering committee, joined by our partners, Jordan, Destiny, Matt, Maikwan, Brian, and support professionals who have raised their voices to ask, how can I do better? We would now like to invite each one of you to join the conversation. Where can you create spaces within your organization, department, or team to better listen to, include, and respect people with disabilities? Where can your work be enhanced by being informed by people with lived experience? How do you support the partnership between professionals and people supported so that we fully understand what good support looks like and sounds like, and support professionals are viewed as and see themselves as enablers of inclusion? The Listen, Include, Respect guidelines are another tool that we can use to enhance the work that we do every single day. They are a roadmap to guide us to remain intentional in our interactions, and it will take all of us, as Tia reminds us, to create a more inclusive Keystone and community. We welcome your partnership in this journey. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope that you'll stay a little while longer and join us for some conversation over a drink and what looks to be some pretty amazing food. Thank you.